Good. Yeah.
This was for a very tall person.
We moved, we gave everybody more give in the cord. So you can push away from me a little, but stay about 6 inches away from this and it'll pick your voice up much better. Just put it in your nose. Just remember to keep your. And a hush falls over the crowd. Okay, I'm going to call to order of the Village of Riverwoods. Would you please stand with me and say the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin this evening, I would just remind everybody to turn their microphones on, but to make sure that they are close enough so that your voice is picked up. We turned them up a little bit, and Director Vasquez will talk a little bit about that later. So starting out, roll call, please.
Mayor Ford,
Present.
Trustee Clayton,
Here.
Trustee Dickon is absent, Trustee Eastman,
Here.
Trustee Hollander,
Here.
Trustee Jamerson,
Here.
and Trustee Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is an approval of the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting for August 6th. Do I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next is our Finance Director's report. We'll start with a motion for approval of the council report, which is the bills.
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Roll
Okay.
call?
Roll
Okay.
call, please.
Trustee Eastman,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson,
Aye.
Trustee Smith,
Aye.
and Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Director Vasquez, your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few items for tonight's report. Some of you may have heard of the recent action the state took to repeal the statewide tax on groceries effective in 2026. This 1% tax can have a large impact to villages with many grocery stores. Some villages are looking to implement their own 1% grocery sales tax locally. Since we do not have any grocery stores in town, we only receive a few $100s a year from items that would qualify for this tax. We can discuss this further at the finance workshop later in the year, but I wanted to provide the board with information about the minimal impact this change has for us. I also have an update about the senior sewer fee exempt accounts. Letters have been sent to residents letting them know if they will continue to receive the waiver, if they no longer qualify, or if they do qualify but were never signed up before. Earlier this summer, when the board voted to continue this program, they asked that a transfer be made from the general fund to the sewer fund to make up for the amount of lost revenue to the sewer fund because of this exemption. We have calculated that total amount that will be waived in 2024, including any of these recent changes, will be $4,014. The Finance Department will do a journal entry to move these funds from the general fund to the sewer fund for the year end, depending on if there's any changes between now and then. Another item of note is that the TIF Joint Review Board meeting is set for 11:30 a.m. on August 29th. The TIF comptroller reports for both TIF districts have already been filed with the state. And I also have some updates on the boardroom audio discussions. So there were some comments at our prior meeting about the acoustics in this room and difficulty with hearing some speakers throughout the audio system in the room. In the past 2 weeks, I've obtained the names of several companies that might be able to help look into the acoustics of this room. Also, we'll be meeting with the building architect later this week to get input from that person as well about potential improvements for this room in terms of the acoustics. In early 2023, we did get a quote from Apt Electronics to install noise control panels to help with the reverberance in this room. At that time, the price was near $27,000 and now would likely be closer to $30,000. However, it doesn't seem like these panels that were suggested came with the kind of acoustical engineering approach that the board asked about at our last meeting. We may need to approach this issue as a capital item that would combine the acoustic engineering along with the cost of any equipment needed to improve the room, as well as potential cost of wireless microphones for next year's budget. Additionally, after our last meeting, our staff came into the boardroom and tested how the microphones sounded at various spots in the room. One thing we noted is how much of a difference it made to hear a speaker depending on how close they were to the microphone. Generally, it is advised to be about 6 inches away from when speaking into your microphone. I know that during meetings, we can tend to look to our sides when speaking to someone else, or perhaps have our microphone a little bit further back if we start commenting when we weren't quite ready to do so. However, until we have any other improvements to this room, we would just suggest that everyone try to speak directly into the microphone and kind of keep it, within 6 inches to try to help others in the room hear, as well as make sure that we're picking up appropriately in the recordings as well. That's all.
Are there any questions or comments for our director? Trustee Hollander, please.
You mentioned that for the senior exemption, that there were people who might qualify that didn't sign up for the program. How did you identify those people?
So the criteria we used is through people who qualify for certain programs through Lake County. So our staff contacted Lake County to see who were on these lists that were used at the time this program was originally put into place. One, so we could verify if the people we had on record were still on those lists and remove anyone that shouldn't be, but also to see were there new people added in the years since that would not have been aware that the village had this program.
Thank you.
Yes.
One other thing that's, I don't know if anybody wants to bother with it, but there are ways of having a microphone that's around your head and just stays in front of your mouth regardless of the position, and then they're not very expensive, and that might be a way of, is it interim steps so that people could look around or may not remember to stay within a few inches of the microphone, and those people might just wear it, and the microphone's always going to be in front of their mouth then.
I think we have one lapel microphone, but Chief, did you want to add something to that, please?
So the way it's set up is we have one wireless microphone on the desk, and we have a lapel mic. And you can only use one or the other because there's only one access point, in the other room. And that would also be costly to add more points just, for that purpose.
So we'll continue the research and we'll be back to you then. Are there no other questions for our finance director? Okay, moving forward, our treasurer is not with us this evening. Director of Community Services, Director Witt, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So following up on discussion from the previous board meeting, we received 4 proposals today from engineering firms in response to our call for firms who might be interested in providing construction engineering services, or basically construction observation services, for the Saunders Road STP program. The program is federally funded in part, and by going through the QBS, or quality-based submittal process, which is what we received proposals for today, we will select a qualified engineering firm for this portion of the work. And in doing so, going through that process, we become eligible for the state to pick up 80% of the cost of the construction engineering services contract. The current estimate of the total project cost is $2.9 million. The estimated cost of construction services, which provides for full-time observation per state requirements to get the funding during the duration of construction, is estimated at this point at $319,000, or about 11% of the total project cost. The state would then pick up 80% of that, or $255,200, and the village would only then be responsible for $63,800. So to go through this simple process really is a tremendous benefit to the village. So the proposals will be reviewed yet this week in order to stay on schedule, and a recommendation be brought forth to the village board for review and award of the contract for the construction engineering services on September 17th. We need to hit that date in order to stay in line with the project schedule with the state. That's all I have.
Are there any questions for our director? Okay, it is on the agenda for the 17th at this point as well. So thank you very much. Attorney's report, please.
I think most of what I have is on the agenda, but when we get to talking about the intergovernmental agreement, how am I doing here? I just want the board to know that we are getting through the due diligence investigations on the property. We just received a survey of the property, the Federal Life property today. There have been some additional requirements to do some further investigations on the site, really not having to do with the site itself, environmental investigations, but because of activity off-site. These are just really precautions. One of the items on the agenda later is a approval of a phase 2 study. Essentially, there were some gasoline tanks in the county right-of-way near Milwaukee. I don't know how many years ago they were there. And many years ago, there was a dry cleaners at Colonial Court. Maybe, I don't know if anyone remembers. So as just to rule out as a precaution, they do these soil gas sampling to make sure that there are no vapors that come up from the soil that we have to be aware of during excavation or when you put in a foundation. So that's the purpose of some of the material you see coming up later on the agenda. But basically, it's because our environmental consultant has been out there quite a bit, tying down a bunch of loose ends. So that's everything else I think is on the agenda.
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, Trustee Jamerson, please.
Are they doing the phase 2 on the whole site or
No.
just on the,
They're just going to go in the building itself and go in the floor. And
oh,
go
in
down.
the building? Okay. Okay, great, thanks.
Any questions? Okay, moving forward, Plan Commission report. Chair Brightcroft, please. We are getting a stand for that. We're getting a stand for it.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, good evening, everyone. The Plan Commission will conduct a public hearing on August 22nd, which is Thursday. We will consider 2 zoning text amendments relating to the federal life property. First, we will consider adding new permitted use in the ONR1 district for governmental facilities such as fire stations. And second, we will consider removing multifamily housing as a special use in the 1R 42,000 square foot district. That's it. Any questions?
Are there any questions for our chair? Okay, thank you very much. Next, Zoning Board of Appeals. Chair Gradiger, please.
It's on.
Okay. I know that it's on, and I have nothing to report.
Oh, just like old times, right? Okay, are there any questions for our chair? Okay, thank you. Police report, Chief, please.
Yes, the police activity is in the packets. Additionally, we did auction off our 2020 Dodge Durango squad car. It sold for $11,100. I called them to question why they didn't take out their 3% fee, because that's what the check that they wrote us for. And for whatever reason, this year they decided they're not charging a fee to municipalities at their auctions. So we saved the 3%. Yeah. Also, we did receive our grant award from the state of Illinois for the purchase of our body-worn cameras, and that was for $37,882.64. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions for our chief? Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you and the department for your service. Fire District Report. Chief Kruger, good to see you.
I really don't have anything 2 months in a row, so nothing exciting really happening, but.
No,
Well, you need
for the
to use the
recording.
microphone. It's the recording thing.
So nothing really going on 2 months in a row, other than working with the village, with the federal life property. I just want to say again, I'm very repetitive, but thank you for the cooperation and the collaboration. Bruce has been really good, Mayor, and everybody else just been keeping us informed. It's kind of going smooth, maybe, Bruce, but it's better than our other experiences that we try to purchase property. But I just want to thank the board and the village for your cooperation. We couldn't be happier.
Thank you. You've been a good partner. If I can add something to that whole thing, is we are considering and hopeful that the building, once we have it in our hands for training for both our police department and our fire department. But there are some things we have to look into before we do that. But it would be a great training opportunity, I think. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work and your service. Next, information items and comments from the president. I just wanted to confirm that our finance workshop meeting will be on October 15th. We will start at 6:30. We'll bring sandwiches, but that would be the time that we're going to start working on our budget, and it's very important. You've heard Director Vasquez talk about it. I just wanted to confirm and make sure that was in everybody's calendar. Next, also on the topic of meeting dates, November 5th is Election Day, and Village Hall is closed on that day, and this entire room is taken up with voting booths and so forth. So we need to reschedule. So if you could please pass along your availability, we can meet that week, another day that week, or we can meet, I hate to meet the following week. Meetings 2 weeks in a row are a little difficult. So we can either skip depending on what's happening, or we can reschedule for that week, tentatively reschedule for that week. So please email me if you can and let me know your thoughts on that. Lastly, status of the South Lake Mosquito Abatement District. I have some good news and I have some bad news. The bad news is that we do not have a seat at the board at the South Lake Mosquito Abatement District. The chair of Lake County Board did appoint a Highland Park resident. And that's perfectly within bounds and according to state statute, all those kinds of things. It was just not our prior practice or their prior practice. But there is a lot of good news here. One item of good news is that we have two residents, Laura Trevino and Rich Kumjian, who are actually leading the decennial committee for the district. And at those discussions, the board, who is largely new individuals, and the board meeting I was at, the newly appointed person joined us before her confirmation. And all of these people are very interested in the future of the South Lake Mosquito Abatement District. Very positive, talking about educational opportunities, all of those kinds of things. Really looking forward toward budgeting, looking out 4 or 5 years, what do we intend to do? So that is the very good news. That is the very good news. And I wanted to pass that along to you. I did go to the board meeting, the Lake County Board meeting, and before the vote on the appointment, I did ask for a delay for discussion among the members who actually represented each of our districts. That would be Highwood, Highland Park, Deerfield, Bannockburn, and Riverwoods. If they could meet before that to talk about the appointment. Got more votes than I thought we were going to get, but lost. So the appointment did go through. So just so you know that Riverwoods was represented. So again, good news all on balance for the South Lake Mosquito Abatement District. So we will still be attending those meetings. Andy and I have been doing a tag team kind of thing, but we will have Laura and Rich attending all of those meetings. So we will be well represented and really leading. So I think that's a good point. Trustee Eastman, please.
Question for you, Chris. Do you think that there would be any way that we could get some sort of, and I mean, we can obviously just attend the meetings on our own, but some sort of official observer status or something along those lines so that we're recognized as, being there? I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is there some sort of halfway compromise that ensures that our voice is heard on a regular basis?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I do know that the thought has come up that we approach our state representatives to amend, that's part of the statute that governs mosquito abatement districts, to suggest that board representation, because it's a taxing body, board representation be of the members of that taxing area, have representation on the board.
That's not a bad idea because I know the statute as it was written gave an awful lot of discretion to the county board chair.
Complete.
Yeah, pretty much.
Unless the district itself went across townships or across county lines, then representation was allocated among the districts, the townships or the counties that are represented in the district. So we can certainly look at that. I really do think that the board members are very open to suggestions from Riverwoods and participation from Riverwoods.
That's good to hear.
So Their meetings are a little difficult to get to. They are at the Deerfield Police Station, and you need to be buzzed in before you can go into the little room where their meetings are held. I
The
brought up,
biggest trick I've had when I've been there has been literally getting in the door to attend the meeting.
yeah, and I don't quite see that as an open public meeting and have mentioned that more than once. So I have also offered our village hall as a meeting place.
That's what
So we'll just keep pushing little by little. I think we're making progress. And again, it's largely good news. Not the best news we could hope for, but largely good news. Any other comments? Okay. Oh, yes, Trustee Smith.
I just wanted to commend you on your comment about getting buzzed in regarding mosquitoes. I thought that was awesome.
Thank you. Wow. I didn't even think of that. Thank you. Thank you. You're listening.
I
am. Thank That could be a last. Moving on to new business. Our first item of new business is the resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement between the County of Lake and the Village of Riverwoods concerning the conveyance of property and site developments at 3750 West Deerfield Road necessary for the upcoming roadway improvements to Deerfield Road from Milwaukee Avenue to Saunders Road. Trustee Hoover, would you like to lead us through this, please?
Attorney.
Attorney, what did I say?
I wasn't promoted.
Close.
Don't worry.
I'll trade places with you.
You want to be the attorney?
Sure, why not?
Attorney Hoover,
Careful what
please.
you wish for.
Really? Thank you, sorry.
The resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement is found on page 38 of the packet. The resolution just basically recites a number of facts and attaches the intergovernmental agreement as an exhibit. Behind the intergovernmental agreement itself, there are 4 exhibits to that document. And I did send out to the board, as I tried to explain, we were negotiating the last few items in this agreement on Friday, trying to get everything out and keep the momentum going. We got the intergovernmental agreement into the board packet, but I wasn't able to get a memo explaining what was in it, so I had to send it out separately. I'm sorry about that, but I ran out of time Friday. The agreement meets a number of our objectives, as I pointed out in the memo to the board. If you turn back, I guess there's even a much better picture of this, I think on about page 59 of the packet. And this is an aerial photograph that our engineering consultant used an aerial photograph to overlay the site improvements. And what it's showing is it's showing the village access road as it curves around the existing detention. It shows the location of the future detention. You see it's kind of sandwiched in between what will be the north lot line of the fire station and the woodlands. And then it shows the new fire station to be developed. So this is the basic redevelopment concept plan for the site. As the memo tried to explain, the county, in its earlier iteration of this plan, had the detention in the northwest corner quadrant of the site and had made an offer to Federal Life that was premised on taking that particular area. One of the things that this agreement accomplishes is it gets the county to agree to move the detention into this location, which is advantageous for all of us for a number of reasons. For one thing, it creates a more attractive buffer between the building and the properties to the north. It puts the detention from an engineering perspective in the lowest place on the property, which makes much more sense than trying to put it in the northwest quadrant. So it saves a lot of construction costs. And it allows the village then to potentially make use of the northwest quadrant. Now, when you look at this picture, you'll see it's very rough. All an engineer has done is overlay an area for detention on the existing parking area. The exact dimension of the detention, the shape of it, these are things that will be finessed. We know the amount of storage, of acre feet of storage that the detention is supposed to accomplish. but how we can shape it to make it beautiful and attractive, exactly where it would end and everything. We don't have the exact details of that, of course, yet. Still, the area in the northwest of the site is probably still just eyeballing at about 2 acres, maybe more depending on how we look at it. Not all of it buildable. Certainly there'll be area that we'll want to stay away from towards the north end of the property. And as we've also discussed, that property may have uses that are merely supportive of the redevelopment of the shopping center. It may be that it provides additional comp storage for shopping center redevelopment. It may provide parking. In one master concept plan from some years ago, Tusca Associates had shown us a small restaurant hugging the access road north of the existing basin. So these are the land use options that we can explore, but the main point is that the county, because we have the mechanism of the intergovernmental agreement, is not bound to continue to make an offer to put detention in a place where nobody wants it anymore. As a result of the intergovernmental agreement, we all now agree it's going to be designed to go into this area. And we also agree that the village will take the lead in installing the detention. This gives us the ability to have a voice at the table, to have discussions about how it looks, to shape the environmental and ecological aspects of the detention, to work with the fire district as a partner in terms of their access and how they get in and off the site, to improve the access road. And one of the things that changed in the last couple of months since we first started looking on this is that the county updated and revised its calculations for the amount of detention that it requires. And in doing so, it was able to sandwich in, I would say, additional detention that takes care of the needs that we had for the access road and leaves even a modest amount for the northwest quadrant if we later develop something there. So in this intergovernmental agreement, the county agrees that when we implement the drainage plan that it has now come up with, they will pay 100% of the cost, including engineering supervision and design. They've told us the percentages that they use for design and engineering supervision. We've passed those along to our consultants who will observe those limitations. The agreement also says that as we get ready to design the work, once we design it, they will review and approve the plans. When we go to let the contract, we will share the contract with them. And they will basically find a mechanism for reimbursing us as we proceed through construction. At least that's the plan. So if this construction takes 3 or 4 months and we have 1 or 2 disbursements before we get to the end of the project, we're trying to make sure that our cash flow needs are covered as we go along. So the cost sharing was another important element of the intergovernmental agreement. Finally, the county wanted to make clear that as we've agreed about all of these aspects of the design, and I'm leaving out a few things that probably aren't as important, but to the county they are, we're granting them the right-of-way that they needed, granting them some of the easements that they needed pursuant to the intergovernmental agreement. There are other agreements that we will have with the county as Deerfield Road work progresses. There's elements of that design which they refer to as the local share. I think we've talked about that before. And so one of the things this intergovernmental agreement mentions is that it's not addressing those items which will come to the board in a subsequent agreement. There'll be a share for some pedestrian improvements, enhancements that the village has asked for. There are some village utilities that are in the road. It's our responsibility to relocate those utilities as the road work progresses. That's really our cost. It's not a county cost because we put our utilities in their right of way by permission with a license, and if they need us to move them, then we have to move them. We can't just tell them, no, you move them now. So there are statements to that effect in the agreement. The county has also been working wonderfully with us, very collaboratively, trying to get this moved very quickly. I think that they have a committee that they're now trying to get this agreement in front of before the end of the month with the aim of getting this before the county board on September 10th. They told us that if the village approves this, and obviously our approval, we wouldn't deliver the agreement as approved until we knew that the county was about to approve theirs as well. But the fact that the board voted to approve this would also be a good factor for the Lake County Board to know that the village had already approved this. So we put this on the agenda tonight rather than try to squeeze it in immediately before the county board meeting, and also to give the board a chance to have an opportunity to ask questions or send us back to the drawing board if need be. So that's what the agreement overall is addressing. And if you have any questions.
Trustee Jamerson, please.
I don't have any issues with the resolution, but I do have a question about the detention at the gas station that I think is in conflict with the future path. Did they take that into account when they did their calculations that they're going to lose some of that detention at the gas station?
They did.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Trustee Hollander?
Is there anything in this agreement that obligates us to do anything other than to provide an access road to the new fire station?
Yes, we have to take care of the future maintenance of the detention areas. That's part of the quid pro quo in this agreement.
I meant regarding the access road, not the retention.
The county is not, all the county is agreeing is that the grading project will include the rough grading for the road. How much we extend the road, how we improve the road, those are all village decisions.
Okay.
Trustee Clayton, did you have a comment? Yes.
Excuse me, on page 45 of the packet, number 3, I just want to make sure we're comfortable with the language. It says if site improvements are not substantially complete, that due to issues with the contractor and supervision by the village. Those are all fairly general terms. If you think we're comfortable with that language, then okay. But it just left me feeling like, boy, there's a lot of ways that could be defined.
So the county, this is something we did go back and forth with the county on. The county is giving us the opportunity to come in and do this work and have our input into the design and shape the way that the basins look. But it also has its own hard stop. It has a problem. What if it gives us all of this rope, we get going, and then we just fizzle out? And then
I understand the purpose of it, yeah.
The reality is they put this in basically to reassure their own side that there was some ultimate out if we did that. But remember, the plans will be approved by the county. The contract will be approved by the county. And the timing is that we're hoping for would be a year before the county starts work. So I guess overall, I felt comfortable that the county was not going to step in to try and complete the work with our contractor without a really serious reason to do so.
Okay. Similarly, on number 5, is it always going to be clear what the difference is between a site improvement and a roadway improvement?
I think it'll be in the plans. I think one of the things our engineering team has been working on very much is trying to make sure that we don't get into the right of way. So any work we do has nothing to do with what's in the county right of way. So I feel like we will define that by the scope of the work that's set out in the plans.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or discussion? May I have a motion for approval of the intergovernmental agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, I think we should have a roll call.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, the next order of business is approval of a proposal from Selden Fox for professional audit services for the fiscal years 2024, 25, and 26 in an amount of $27,000 per year and $7,500 for a single audit in any of those years if necessary. Director Vasquez, can you please lead us through this?
Yes, the village entered a 3-year engagement with Selden Fox to provide professional audit services in October of 21. We recently completed the 3rd year of that agreement. After internal discussion, our staff believes that renewing this agreement for another 3-year cycle would be in the best interest for the village, and we sought pricing from Selden Fox. The continuity of having the same auditor for another cycle will help our staff as we continue work to improve our financial operations. Selden Fox is aware of the areas we are looking to strengthen and can provide assistance and guidance in those efforts. We worked closely with Selden Fox this last year to improve the timeliness of completing the audit and experienced a much better outcome than in recent years. After some negotiation, Selden Fox is proposing a 3-year engagement for $27,000 per year with an additional cost of $7,500 if a single audit is required in any of those years. For context, in our last agreement, the pricing from Selden Fox was $25,000 per year and $6,000 for a single audit.
Is there a motion for approval? Oops.
Sure, I'll move it, so I'll
okay.
move it for approval.
Second.
Okay. Trustee Jamerson.
Now I have a question. I guess I don't understand the terminology. The proposed fee is $27,000 for 3 years, for each of the 3 years, right?
Yes.
And that's going to give us an audit for that year.
Yes.
Then I'm confused as to why we would have a single audit for any one of those years.
So the single audit is an additional work that would be performed if the village received and expended a certain amount of grant money in any given year. I believe the current threshold is $750,000 and goes up to, I believe in next year it'll go up to 1 million. So in the event that we have a large project with a grant of that size, they're putting in what that fee would be.
So it's an audit for a specific, project or a grant or something.
Right, for grant-related projects if necessary.
Got it. I just was confused by the terminology. Thank you.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yeah, so it looks to me like the 27,000 coming up from 25,000 is about CPIW, a little bit less than 3%. Makes sense to me. I was just a little concerned, or maybe the question is why the single audit is going up by 25% when the annual audits are going up by, call it CPIW. It seemed like a lot. I mean, relatively small dollars, I understand that, but it seemed like a big percentage.
It did go up by a little bit more, for about $2,500 per year. The village has not used a single audit. I don't know that we would reach that. I guess it would be almost a good problem to have if we were receiving grant monies in those amounts.
So we're getting a lot of money to spend a little.
but I do think that part of it could be because that threshold moved up from 750,000 to 1 million, which I believe starts next year, that any of the audits that they're going to be doing are going to be kind of a little bit bigger in scope for them to work through, is my probably the thought process there.
Yeah, that seems rational. The other thing you mentioned was that we had negotiated. Do you have any sense of the negotiated savings or the what they've come down? I'm just kind of curious.
So thanks to the shrewd negotiation skills of Trustee Clayton, came down by $2,000 per year.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next order of business is approval of a proposal from Anderson Environmental Consulting for environmental consulting services related to performing a Phase 2 environmental site assessment for the Federal Life property in an amount not to exceed $8,900. Attorney Huvard, will you please speak to this?
I thank you. I did mention this at the outset. They're going to take a sample inside the building, I think is what he explained to me. It's fairly remote, but what they check for is these vapors can travel underground. So if you have what they call a recognized environmental condition, and because of these tanks that were there many years ago, or the dry cleaners, they look to see whether a plume has come in any direction that could it's not good to inhale these vapors. So usually the solution is you pave over, it's covered with a foundation, or sometimes they'll even, if you have like a residential use in a property like this, you might bring in dirt, or you might say, don't dig down below 3 feet or something like that. But in our case, all of this is fairly just checking off the boxes. By doing this phase 2 study, he's hoping to be able to minimize the reference to this recognized environmental condition as having any relevance in the phase 1 report. So it really is just, from his standpoint, house cleaning for us.
Is there a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Eastman?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Oh, and if I can, I forgot to mention, they also already took asbestos samples, and they found no concern except for one small area of floor tile that probably been put in by a tenant in one office, and they have to test it again. So they're testing it further, but I don't expect that to be an issue for the building.
Last item of new business is the approval of the establishment of a board committee for strategic public land use with a budget not to exceed $5,000 for consultant engagement. I mentioned this last meeting, that trustees Clayton and Hollander were interested in forming this committee, and so we are making it a committee of the board. I will not be sitting in, so it will not be a public meeting. So just an FYI on that one. So is there any discussion? Or let's ask for a motion for approval first.
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I think this is just an aye or, oh no, there's money involved, right? Okay, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Eastman?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to old business. We have one item of old business, and that is the ordinance amending and restating provisions of the Riverwoods Village Code concerning diseased and hazardous trees. I believe we're going to continue the discussion on this, and if I might ask Attorney Huvard
Hello.
to make some comment.
Hello again. We received comments back on the ordinance, especially from Trustee Clayton. Again, thank you. It's been very busy last couple of weeks. We added a definition that was useful for the Director of Community Services. One of the concepts that you see in a lot of these ordinances, and by the way, if you were to go back and redline this against the existing code, you would see that there is a lot of overlap, even though we've reworded things. A lot of the provisions that seem troubling at first glance are in the existing code as well. Maybe we've made them a little bit better. There was a concept of the village forester doing things. Many villages, they like to have the authority for things reside in the village manager. We don't have a village manager. So we had initially suggested the Director of Community Services would undertake things, but in fact, he is administering the chapter, but he's not the one making the determinations. He's not qualified, he would say, and that's why he would make those determinations based on the advice of the village forester. So I think one of the things we did is to clarify that the Director of Community Services is responsible for enforcement in coordination with the village forester with regard to obtaining findings of hazardous or diseased trees. We, I think, limited the inspection rights. Most of the time, these things are they're overwritten. I mean, they claim all kinds of inspection rights that we don't exercise, because if someone tells us to leave the property, we leave the property and we have to come back and get an administrative warrant. So I think it was a good suggestion to actually make the inspection rights consistent with law, consistent with what we already do. A number of questions came up about making clear that property owners should be observant of trees on their property that overhang streets and private ways. And again, we rephrase this slightly, of overhanging boughs or limbs of sufficient diameter to be hazardous. So it's not just anything overhanging, but something that, can fall and hurt someone. The heights above the right-of-ways were things that I think Director Witt suggested to us, 8 feet above a sidewalk, 15 feet above a public way or street, because that's the height needed for fire engines. And I understand we had just a situation last week where a tree was almost about to fall and impeded the garbage truck from coming down the street. So this section is new. We don't have this provision in the code right now, but it would obligate owners to take steps to remove those overhanging limbs that are hazardous. I think we also lengthen the time for response from 30 to 45 days, and we also indicated that the owner for good cause may submit a request for extension of time to remove the nuisance, which may be granted at the discretion of the Director of Community Services. We realized that a lot of times it could take longer to address some of these issues. The reason I didn't think that 45 days was a problem is because we still retain the right in the event of an emergency to act immediately. So this is really just giving more time to the homeowner if it's not an emergency at that moment. Finally, we softened the penalty provision to suggest that in this case, each day's continued violation isn't every day a penalty, which could add up very quickly. We suggested after more than 10 days have passed since the initial violation, which is, again, a violation after 45 days of not doing anything. So that's the suggestion for, at least one suggestion for how to soften that particular provision. We can continue to get comments on this now since we're not taking this up until the next meeting. If you have more comments and need more time, to get them to us, we can take them, or we can, discuss further now if you like.
Trustee Jamerson.
I just have a quick question about the immediate public safety concern, which is on page 74, I think, under C. It states that there's a compliance stated in a notice that's not less than 45 days after the date of delivery or mailing the notice. But if a tree falls across the road and it's blocking the road, does this allow our police department to call Davey Tree or whoever we're contracted with at the time to come and remove the tree if the homeowner doesn't immediately do it? Because it seems like there's a question of whether we have to mail something to them or physically deliver a notice to them.
That's an order to trigger a duty on their part if we have time, and if we tell them to do something. But if you look at the end of section 545, because
5, okay,
this is, again, it's trying to put it the language where we thought it would most logically would be looked for. So this is in the new section, the duty to maintain trees, which, be observant of trees that can cause a problem. If the responsible owner fails to remove the trees after receipt of notice, if the hazard constitutes an immediate public safety concern, the village may perform the necessary remedial work immediately.
Okay, yeah, I'm obviously.
It's just hiding in another place.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments? Trustee Eastman, please.
Yeah, I guess in 545, the duty to maintain trees, where we added in the sufficient diameter to be hazardous. I'm thinking of, in certain cases where there's buckthorn, right? I mean, that's typically the one that goes over the road. Sufficient diameter to be hazardous. Boy, that's hard to determine. And I guess my thought with that is I could see just looking at my own street and going forward, that one might be contentious in terms. So is it the village forester that would make that decision, and what process would they follow, and how frequently would that be assessed?
This was, obviously we had some concerns about how extensive this duty was when it was triggered. I think probably we need to maybe talk to the forester and think about this a little bit more. I'm not very happy with sufficient diameter standing by itself. Yeah. And maybe we can think of some other, basically we're looking for something that impedes travel.
Right.
And that may not be just based on diameter. It may just be based on something else.
I would, my intent there would be to have something that people could look at and isn't subjective, right? Because where you get in, even with the hazardous trees, right, is always this sort of subjective criteria. And there's times when it can be pretty expensive for homeowners to, and certainly because these things haven't been that well enforced before, I could see that being contentious
Yeah,
with
yeah.
certain people.
I'll make a note to revisit that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or suggestions to be incorporated? Okay, we will not be voting this evening on this issue. As is our custom, I have asked Trustee Dickon, who is not able to be here this evening, if there was something on the agenda that she wished to participate in, and she would like very much to participate in the discussion of this item. So we are putting it over. Okay, no further old business. Visitors wishing to address the board. Okay, please step forward to the seat, and your name and address would be good.
Although not required.
Although not required, sorry.
You need to use the microphone, sorry,
Yeah.
because we're recording this.
Name is Gregory Dovner. Address is 2800 Duffy Lane. Spelling? D-O-L-I-N-E-R. I was here specifically for the discussion of the changes to the hazardous and diseased tree ordinances, but since we're not having it, question is, when are we? Potentially.
When are we?
Yeah.
It will be on the agenda for the next meeting, September 3rd.
Okay. I wouldn't have known about the concerns that my neighbors have voiced to me today, and they were rather distressed about it because of the findings within it, because I'm personally not in the email distribution from the Preservation Council, which distributed the emails inviting.
Yes.
I would like to address the concerns that were bullet pointed in the email that was sent out today, inviting to the meeting, and I would like to know who to submit the concerns to, so that they're properly brought up when the discussion actually occurs.
You can certainly write to the Office of the Mayor, and we can forward those concerns on to Director Witt and Attorney Huvart.
Okay.
You should know that perhaps, the email that was sent out did not fully capture what is posted on the website. There were some additional changes, so maybe that would make a difference as well. So you might want to look at those first.
Well, there was a link actually to the full body of the document, but the bullet points themselves, there was a problem with one right away, and it had nothing to do with the ones that you guys just discussed, by the way. Not the fines, not anything else. It was actually quite something else. People were concerned with the potential unlimited authority.
Potential unlimited authority of...
Yeah,
okay.
according to the bullet points of new things being added or introduced, it had to do with authorization of village director, community services, or designee to enter at any and all reasonable times, or rather hours, to inspect hazardous or diseased tree or remove specimens where this particular bullet points doesn't have any relationship to public walkways, roadways like all the other ones do. Doesn't mention public nuisance, doesn't mention private streets, doesn't have any scope and limitation on what exactly that person is examining and how deeply into my property that person is preparing to venture, and why. Is there anything even reported as a hazard? Nothing mentioned in here except for
Maybe we can put your mind at rest and talk about access to properties for village code violations building code violations and things of that sort. And I think there was intended to be a parallel there, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you'll see in the revised ordinance that we tried to address that concern. The right to inspect for certain things by state law was because of the spread of some of the things like Dutch elm disease and emerald ash borer. Those regulations keep changing to some extent. And when you write an ordinance and you're dealing with trees that are just overhanging streets, so they impede passage, then you have trees that could fall that are structurally unsound, that are hazardous, and you have trees that are actually suffering from an infection that can spread to other trees. You actually have like 3 different types of situations. I think at one point, the state was suggesting that because of the nature of some of the Dutch elm, earlier Dutch elm and emerald ash borer controls, that it was necessary to try and regulate and go on and inspect for those. We actually never have, gone on property for that purpose. But in the revision that we put in there, we did specify that there were no inspections allowed except consistent with law. And as I said, when we go on a property, if the owner says, please leave, we have to leave. We don't have the right to stay in most cases without an administrative warrant. So I think we tried to make the ordinance more consistent with the reality than the way it had been stated even in the existing code.
I understand. Like I said, the reason why it raised any red flags in people who had received the email, which I didn't, it's because how drastically it is different in lack of scope being described within it compared to every single other bullet point mentioned, because all of them are for a purpose of the potential public nuisance, potential danger, potential roadway blockage, potential this, potential that, private street or public walkway. This one doesn't have a limit of, or doesn't have a reason or a scope for why that inspection is made.
Well, that's why when it says consistent with law, that would provide, you would have to have an adequate reason. It's a shorthand way rather than trying to write out all the possible reasons. It's just say, well, it has to be consistent with law. So someone would come to me and say, do we have the right to go on the property? And I'd have to say, what's the reason? Why are we doing this? And then we'd have to have a discussion.
That's what it was, that the lack of reason specified within the text of this ordinance.
Well, some of the reasons were because there was a suspicion of an infected tree. Sometimes you can observe without, it's like probable cause. You can see a tree that's practically fallen over or is on the verge of falling over. So the forester may signal to us that there's a tree that needs to be examined, but historically the village has not done this anywhere except the entire hazardous tree survey is only being conducted from the right-of-ways. The village forester doesn't have the resources. We wouldn't want them to go walking around all the properties. They're walking on the streets to see what can fall. So most of the time when a hazardous tree situation comes to our attention that's not on a right-of-way, it's because a neighbor has complained. They called us and they said, I keep talking to the person next to me. They're not doing anything about it. I'm worried about my kids. The tree's going to fall on the playground. What should I do? So it's really only in certain scenarios that we would even be aware of a tree in the middle of someone's property.
I appreciate the response, and that is exactly what I sort of attempted to testify the concerns, but nonetheless, then I was asked to stop by and listen on. Yeah, so essentially that shouldn't allow a person with no reason or justification whatsoever to wonder about my property, or if it was my neighbor's property in that case, because she was concerned that has no limit or specification of why that person would show up. Well, she was certainly right, because there's none of that specified. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Anybody else wishing to address the board this evening? Randy?
No, it's not on.
No. Flip this.
Oh, no, yes, good.
Randy Merrill, Riverwoods Preservation Council. Well, it's good to see somebody's reading the emails.
But not him.
So, well, we've got a lot of good discussion going on. But thank you also, Mayor Ford, for letting us know that you had made there were some revisions to what had gone out. And as a matter of fact, in case you hadn't seen that, we did send out an email blast completely after that to let them know, literally at 4 p.m. when we communicated that there had been an update on August 20th, 4 p.m. revision to hazardous tree codes. And we made mention that the code revision being voted on tonight has been updated to address most of the concerns we posted in our prior email. So that was nice, and we wanted to support that, so thank you. Only thing that we left on there was the stated at reasonable hours, which, you know, I don't know if it wasn't specific, and we just thought maybe people would have questions about it. And then I also had a link to that updated code directly for everybody.
Great, thank you for that.
Then I want to also let you know we had a very fun garage sale event. We were very busy in the beginning. I think that August might be a time when people are on vacation and getting a lot of people out, our buyers were, it was a little bit slower, you know, early on than we would hope. So as we did in 2023, we'd like to convert that date back to June. Seems like that might have been a better draw. So if that's okay, we will send out some dates and clarify with the village. And again, as a reminder, we have the plant sale coming up. Our orders have been a little bit slow, but we're going to still do an inventory sale. We'll figure out, you know, what's maybe going to be most attractive to show, to display that people would want to buy. And then again, we're going to have the recycle event that's going to be in October. I have not, but thank you for a contact to see if we can get some other communities to help share the cost of the shredder. I was out of town. I did not have a chance to reach out, but I will do so. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any questions or comments or?
Not for her.
Okay.
But I do have one
Trustee Jamerson.
quick thing.
Sure.
Last meeting, the question was asked about real estate and how they are, properties are moving or not moving in Riverwoods. And just by chance, I got a mailer today that told me everything I needed to know.
Yes.
And in case anybody didn't look at it, during the first or second, must be first and second quarter is what I believe. There were 33 homes that were for sale in the village. They were on the market for an average of 64 days. And the median list price was $699,000. The average list price was $841,000. The maximum price was just under $2 million. And it was about $27 million worth of homes. So 64 days, I don't know if that's good or bad, but seems like that's a pretty good turnover time. So I just thought I would update that before I forgot next meeting.
That was Lee, right?
Yeah. It was a pamphlet about this big. There was a bunch of stuff in there, but this caught my attention.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Vermentino sends one out too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Okay, then our next, no need to go into executive session tonight. Establish our next time and date for the next meeting is September 3rd, the day after Labor Day. So unless there are any other comments, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much.